we had a long Torah reading, and now we're on page 181. We've gone through 80 pages of prayer this morning, and we've got like, I don't know, 40 or 50 more. There are a lot of words in Jewish prayer. It tends to move fast. Most people would say too fast. Most people would say we need an editor after 2,000 years of collecting prayer after prayer after prayer. We just can't let go. Probably need to start to let go of a little bit of it. I was talking with, and that can be difficult. I want to just name that can be difficult. I was talking with a couple this week about how the emphasis on community in Judaism, the infinite emphasis on our liturgy and on all the communal things can leave us feeling that there's no place for the individual experience. Abraham Joshua Heschel famously said that we dare not immolate the individual on the altar of community. And we can do that, and we have to be sure not to let that happen. And one of the most important skills in Jewish life is for individuals who are coming to pray is to give yourself permission to know when are the times when I don't need to be completely absorbed with everything that's happening either on the bima or in the prayer book, and when I can just focus on my own experience, versus one of the times when, you know what, I probably should join with what's happening. There's a strange ritual. Yehuda Kurtzer, who is the president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, a few days before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, posts something usually on Facebook, and he says, okay, here's what I'm going to be reading during services, right? He has a habit of coming to high holiday services when this problem is compounded, and he always brings a Jewish, it's not the comic books, okay, but he brings a Jewish book to read, right? Something that will keep his attention, keep his interest, because he knows that you're not always going to be connected with everything that's happening. One of the places where it is really important for leaders to slow down who are reading the prayer service is saying Shema. In the Torah, there's somebody with a nice Jewish name. I said that ironically, Simakus. I don't think that's a Jewish name, but it was. And he got in the Talmud, and he says, whoever prolongs the word echad, when we say Shema, echad, I don't know exactly how you prolong the daled at the end, but whoever prolongs the word echad has his days and years prolonged. In other words, you get to live a long life if you focus really much on echad. And he's telling us, slow down. This is a really, really important place to slow down. And what I want to give you this morning is 3 approaches to what you can be thinking about as we say Shema. Okay, now I'm not in charge of you. You can think about whatever you want, but I'm just giving you 3 approaches from the tradition. One of them I'm going to call numerology. Okay, and there are 2 different. Rabbi Acha ben Yaakov in the Talmud says you should dwell on Dalid, on the letter Dalid in the word Echad, because Dalid has it's the 4th letter in the. What you're supposed to dwell on, you're supposed to meditate that God is the creator of the world, sovereign above and below, in heaven and on earth, and in the 4 corners of the earth. Okay, so you think about Dalet, you think about the number 4, and you almost take a tour and you say, God is all around me, is everywhere in all 4 corners of the earth. Another approach with numerology, Rabbi Ashi responded and he said, you can do that, but don't slur over the chet. Okay, don't slur over the chet. The chet, the chad, right? The chet is really important. Chet is the Hebrew alphabet. And according to him, and Rav Kook explains this a little bit more, the number 8 represents 7 days of the week, a complete cycle, and then 1, which is sort of what's beyond, right? And the idea behind this is that we should meditate on God's unity throughout all time, but also sort of beyond time. Right, that God is in our time, but also beyond time. So if you like numerology, if you like math and you want to do that, you can either think about the number 4 or the number 8 from Echad, from Dalet, or Chet. That's one approach. Number 2 is you can, the tradition would have us keep in mind the stories that we tell about this moment. And really, when we say, "Hero Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," who is Israel in that moment? So one story that the tradition tells about this moment is that Jacob, Israel, the patriarch, is on his deathbed, and he's about to reveal, to reveal the end of days. The Torah seems to indicate that he's about to reveal some great prophecy, and prophecy goes blank from him. He all of a sudden he can't see anything, and he says, whoa, is there a problem? Maybe some of my children are not keeping the tradition. And his children gather around him and say, "Shema Yisrael, listen, Israel," right? "Dad, listen, Dad. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one." Right? And if we think about that story, maybe what we are doing is we're connecting ourselves when we say Shema. We are reminding Jacob, we are reminding Israel of long ago, and reminding ourselves that we are continuing to keep the Jewish tradition that has been passed on to us for thousands of years, when each time that we say Shema. The other possibility for Hero Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, is that we are actually, if we're in synagogue, we're talking to each other. Hero Israel, right? All of us are Yisrael. And in that way, we are a community who sort of are reinforcing and helping each other with our faith, and reinforcing our connectedness to each other. By the way, if we are alone, there's something very powerful about saying, "Listen, O Israel," and when we're alone, knowing that we are still connected to the Jewish people wherever we are around the world and throughout eternity when we say the words of the Shema. The last one that I want to give you is something that I alluded to in the blessing for our Chatan and Kala, which is that when we say, "Hero Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," we are not making a mathematical statement that God is one and not two. We are saying, Adonai, our God, you alone. But part of what is meant by this, according to the Kabbalah, according to the Zohar, is that when we say God is Echad, what we're saying is God is utterly and completely incomprehensible and unknowable. The Zohar says that when we say Shema, we are doing what's called a Yichuda Ila'ah, which means a unification of God's name in the world above. And Rabbi Shner Zalman, who was the founder of Chabad and the author of the Tanya, he actually agrees with Rabbi Chaim of Voloshin, who's a Misnagi. They're usually against each other, but both of them seem to agree about this, that when you say, and this is a very radical idea, that when you say Shema and you say that God is Echad, what you're saying is that one doesn't just indicate the absence of multiplicity, but rather, and this is pretty crazy, nothing else can be said to truly exist except for God. When we say in this week's Parsha, and we're going to sing it in Aleinu a little bit later, V'yadata hayom v'hashivota el levavecha, know therefore this day and consider it in your heart that Adonai is God in heaven above and earth below. Ein od. They attach a word to that. Ein od, mamash. There's nothing else except for God. And what that means, the reason it's so radical, is that what it means is that the possibility, we contemplate the possibility that this world is an illusion. That in the face of God, everything is reduced into nothingness. It is unreal. It vanishes into non-existence. The Tanya puts it this way: for the physical world too, which appears to the eye as utterly substantial, is literally nothing and naught compared to the Holy One. My son Benjamin is here. He's leaving tomorrow for college. God, I hope he forgives me for mentioning this. But when he was a little kid, One time he turned to Jennifer and he said, "Is this all just a dream?" Little did he know he was channeling the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shner Zalman. Is this all? What if this is all just a dream? What if we are just part of God? Rabbi Maurice Lamb, by the way, says that this is actually one explanation for the source explanation for the tradition that we have of covering our eyes with our hands when we say Shema, that doing so symbolizes the unreality of the phenomenal world that is perceived by the senses. The eyes are shielded in order to emphasize that the sensate world does not in fact exist, that nothing is real except for God, and that when we say Shema, what we are doing in many ways is uniting ourselves with the oneness in the world. That is what the Zohar calls the Yichuda de Le'ela, the upper unification. And then we say Baruch Shem Kavod. We say that second line, which is a sort of a restatement. But when we have this meditation, we say that second line as a way of acknowledging everything may be an illusion and maybe we're all just part of God, but we live in this world. Because, by the way, if everything is part of God, it makes everything very complicated. What does it matter if you do this or that? If you eat kosher or treif, if you hurt somebody, you don't hurt somebody, it's all part of God. You lose a sense of will and free will. And for the Kabbalah, they said, no, say Baruch Shem Kavod, to acknowledge we're not going to live that way. I give you all three of these things. There are many, many more. I'll finish with a story that after the Holocaust in 1945, there were many, many Jews who were in DP camps, and there were other people in DP camps and also in orphanages. Orphanages had been filled with Jewish children whose parents had turned them over to the church in the hopes that they would survive. And some Jewish parents made it and they came back later. And a story is told that when they wanted to know whether or not if they could find their Jewish children, would the children even remember after many years that they were Jewish, that some Jewish parents would walk into the orphanage and a crowd of children and would call out, Shema Yisrael. And sometimes the Jewish children would turn their heads.